Hi, and welcome back to the Race Coordinator race format, race configuration tutorials. In this tutorial, we're going to actually configure and run a step-up race. Step-up races are really cool. It's a really cool race format in which drivers race in essentially small little subgroups that are scored based on whatever settings you have, whatever settings you've configured, and once the little subgroups mini race is finished, the winner or winners, depending on the property settings you choose, of that subgroup advance to the next subgroup, and that keeps repeating itself until you get to the final subgroup, and then the winner of that final subgroup will be essentially the race winner. So I'm going to use the race manager as always, as you've probably grown accustomed to, because I like to just click on my little round robin tutorial here that I've already created and start off of that. So we're going to look over here, and you're going to see that this is the round robin race. There's 20 heats. They run in a standard round robin format, straight up round robin. You're going to notice up here on the heat layouts screen there is no step up options. There is no way to set up a step up race here. That is because a step up race, although it does affect the heat rotations because it creates little, what I'm going to call mini subgroups for the race, it does not actually change how the heat rotations within those subgroups work, or any of the other scoring settings or configurations at all. So it's literally just an augmentation onto whatever your current race format is. So you can imagine, each subgroup basically has between 2 and the number of lanes on your track, or 2 and the number of lanes on your track, number of drivers in it. So the standard round robin we created, if it were a step-up race, would create subgroups such that there's at least 2 drivers in the subgroup, and they will round robin across all the lanes before a winner is declared of that subgroup, and then who steps up into the next race. So if you go to the scoring settings, so since it's it's a way of calculating the overall standings, it's over here in the scoring settings, and you'll see here there's a step-up checkbox, and we're just going to check that to make it a step-up race. Now we're basically a step-up race, with the exception that the number to step up needs to be between basically 1 and it has to be less than the lane count. It doesn't make sense to step up the total number of lanes on your track. That means it doesn't matter if you win the step-up mini group, everybody would step up. So, and if you set it to 0, then nobody steps up, so you got nothing. So we're going to use 1 just because 1 is a nice, easy thing to see to start with. That's probably the most common way people will step up. You can do 2 and a 4-lane track, which we're running here. You could even do 3, in which case only the loser of the mini group would not step up. Whatever you choose, Race Coordinator will more than happily let you do it. So if we go back to the heat configuration now, you're going to see some changes here. You're going to notice that now instead of drivers 1, 2, 3, and 4 over here, drivers 19, 20, and 2 empty lanes are there. And you're going to notice also that there are 28 heats instead of the 20. That's because, again, Race Coordinator has figured out little subgroups to create. The first one being drivers 19 and 20. There's only 2 in this group, and you'll see that they're going to do in Heat 2, they advance standard format. Heat 3, they standard round robin. Heat 4, standard round robin. At the end of this heat, because we said 1 driver will step up, the winner of those 4 heats, based on how you set up the scoring, will advance into the step-up location in Heat 5. Now you'll notice that if you keep going down, Heat 6 is rotating in a standard round-robin format with the winner of the previous subgroup here in the step-up lane, and then the other drivers. Now, you'll notice, so if you get all the way down, if you continue on, Heat 24 is where, Heat 25 rather, is where drivers 1, 2, 3, and then a step-up. So this ends up being the first heat of the finals of the step-up race. This is an important thing to notice, because what it means is that the drivers seeded 1, 2, and 3 only have to win this last sub-race to win the entire race, whereas the drivers seeded 19th and 20th, they actually have to win 4 or so step-ups to get to the finals and win the entire race. So there's a huge advantage between being driver 20 and 19 and being drivers 1, 2, or 3. So what the real implication of this is that the typical usage of a step-up race would be in an event-type thing in Race Coordinator, in which you would have a qualifying race first to determine seeding, and what that qualifying could be anything. It could be a straight round robin, it could be some custom rotation you're using. It could be a single lane, fastest lap time type of qualifying, whatever you want. But then the seeding based on the qualifying would carry over into the step-up format, and you get a more fair way of doing the step-up. I mean, basically, whoever does the best in the qualifying has the biggest advantage in the step-up race, because it's important to know that you can only, in a step-up race in the overall standings, you can only be ranked as high as the other members of your sub-race. So so once you get into, so for example, once we get out of the first subgroup and we get into Heat 5, drivers 19 and 20 will never be ranked higher than 16, 17, and 18, no matter what they do in their round-robin rotation, unless they're the winner of that previous subgroup and they're in this subgroup with them. So you can see some funky standing scores in the overall leaderboard, because you can see potentially, one of the fastest total, one of the largest number of total laps, for example, and yet they're still ranked fairly low on the leaderboard, and that's simply because they did not win their step-up subgroup. The other thing to notice here is, again, every single property in Race Coordinator affects the subgroups as if it was the full grouping. So you can apply point scoring to the subgroupings. In this case, since this is a round robin, this would be something that wouldn't be unreasonable. You win your heat, you get 20 points. You have your carryover percentages, whatever you want to do. You can rank your lap spot. You can rank your heats based on fastest lap or total time. You can change the timing of the heats so that it's time based, not lap count based, not time based. All of these things are affecting the subgroups now instead of just the main, instead of just the overall race. And every time you start a new subgroup, the previous drivers, obviously their totals, they reset to 0 so that they're on an equal plane with the drivers that haven't raced yet. You'll see all of that once you start a race and start a step-up race and you run it, which I'm going to try to have time to do here. The other thing I wanted to show you here is if I'm going to change this to a single-lane step-up race, and you're going to see immediately that the heat rotations have changed. Now instead of 28 heats, we have 7. And that's because, again, the properties affect the subgroups as if it was, as if this weren't a step-up race. So a single-lane race means that the drivers only race on one lane on the track, meaning they only participate in one heat for the race, and that's it. In a single lane race, it's fairly customary. You would maybe let the drivers pick their lane assignments based on seating, for example, or whatever. So the race manager, when the heat is ready, would allow, in this case, driver 19 to pick his lane and then driver 20 to pick their lane, based on whichever one was ranked higher and whatever. And then you race. You can do all that through the race day screen in the director menu. But this is good enough for what I want to show, and I've got a little bit of time, so I think I'm going to make it. I'm going to try to run this race real quick, and I'm going to show you a few laps really quickly. So I'm going to call this one single lane _ step up, and we're going to add it. So there you have it. We've just created our step up race. I'm going to close out of here. I've got debug mode turned on. I've got the step up race selected, and I'm going to run the race. So now I'm just going to bring up the leaderboard real quick so you can see all the drivers are sorted based on their initial seating. That's fairly common. And I'm going to start the heat. And
5,
I'm not going to change
4,
the lane assignments, but you can
3,
certainly do that through
2,
the
1,
race director modify
go.
menu, which is right here. Obviously, I'm running the race now, so you can't. But so what you're going to see is you're going to see
new lap record.
Laps. And you'll notice now that they have 1 lap each, but they're at the bottom of the leaderboard. That's because they cannot pass the subgroup that they're in. That's as high as ranking as they can get until they win this heat and go to the next subgroup.
New
So
lap
what
record.
I'm just going to do is I'm going to pause this race.
Yellow flag.
And I'm going to skip it, which is going to allow driver 20 to win because he was the first 1 to 3 laps. So I'm going to skip this.
Heat over.
Now what you're going to see is the next subgroup. So now the interesting thing is driver 20 is down here because he won. You'll notice over here on the leaderboard his score is back to 0, and he's racing now with 16, 17, 18, and 19. I'm going to once again start this race.
5, 4, 3.
And you'll see again
go.
How this is going to behave. And I'm running out of time. I've got about 20 seconds, but so that's it. As they advance,
New lane record.
this heat will advance to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, and finally the finals race, and you'll have your winner.
Best heat
and that'll
lap.
be your overall ranking. So that's a step-up race. I hope you found this useful.